The smell of burning photographs is something I will carry until the day my heart finally stops pretending it can forget. It is not like burning paper. It is sweeter, thicker, almost chemical. Because the gloss on old prints melts before it ignites. And the faces dissolve into colored smoke that climbs the chimney in a slow, deliberate spiral. I remember standing in the doorway of my father's study at 2 a.m, barefoot on the cold pine boards, watching him feed our entire history into the fireplace, one frame at a time. He did not see me. He did not hear me. He was humming, and that was the part that broke something in me before anything else had a chance. My name is Daniel Vance. I was 29 years old the night my father, Walter Vance, burned every photograph in our house. I had driven up to the lake property in Rivermouth County because my sister Claire called me crying, saying our father had emptied his bank account, bought a generator the size of a small car, and stopped answering his phone. Claire is older than me by 4 years, sharper, more practical, the kind of woman who treats panic like a math problem she can solve if she just writes down enough variables. When Claire cries, you drive. I had been in the house for less than 6 hours when I found him doing it. He was kneeling in front of the hearth in his old corduroy jacket, the one my mother used to patch at the elbows before she died. And there was a cardboard box beside him I recognized immediately. The blue box. The box that had lived on the top shelf of the hallway closet for as long as I had been alive. Birthdays, Christmases, the picture of Claire holding me on the day I came home from the hospital, the picture of my mother on the dock at sunset, squinting, laughing at something my father had said off camera. He was burning them in order. That was the worst part. He was going chronologically, oldest to newest, as if performing a ritual that required precision. When he reached for a photograph of the 4 of us at Claire's college graduation, I finally spoke. Dad. He did not jump. He did not turn quickly. He simply lowered the photograph back into the box, rested his hands on his knees, and exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for years. You weren't supposed to see this, Danny, he said. What are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago. I crossed the room. I did not run. I think part of me already understood that running would not help. That whatever was happening had been happening for a long time underneath the surface of our lives. And I had simply been too far away to notice. I knelt beside him. The fire was hot enough to make my eyes water, but I think I would have been crying anyway. Talk to me, I said. Please. He looked at me then, and his eyes were not the eyes of a man losing his mind. That is what I want to be clear about. My father was not confused. He was not slipping. He was the most lucid I had seen him in years, and that lucidity was somehow more terrifying than dementia would have been, because it meant he had a reason. In 2 days, he said quietly, none of this will matter. And if anyone finds these pictures, they will use them to find you. They will use them to find Claire. I will not allow that. So I am erasing us. Do you understand? I did not understand. I would not understand for 48 more hours. But I nodded, because he was my father, and because there was something in the back of his voice, a tremor underneath the calm, that told me whatever he believed it with his whole life. He handed me a photograph of my mother and told me to throw it in. I did not throw it in. I held it against my chest like a child holding a stolen cookie. And my father did not argue. He simply watched me for a long moment, then nodded once, as if granting me a single concession in a transaction whose terms I had not yet read. Then he went back to feeding the fire. And I sat on the floor beside him, with my mother's face pressed to my ribs, and we did not speak again for nearly an hour. Claire arrived at dawn. She had driven through the night from the city, and her hair was tied back in that severe way she only used when she was preparing to be angry at someone in a professional capacity. She walked into the study, saw the fireplace, saw the empty blue box, saw me sitting on the floor in the same clothes I had been wearing the night before, and her face did something I had never seen it do. It collapsed inward, just for a second, before she rebuilt it into the courtroom mask she wore for difficult clients. "Where is he?" she said. "Garage." She went to the garage. I heard their voices through the wall, hers rising, his staying perfectly level, which I knew from childhood was the worst sign. My father only became calm when he had already decided something, and no argument in the world was going to move him. He had been calm the day he told us our mother's cancer had come back. He had been calm the day he sold his practice. He was calm now. When Claire came back into the study, she sat down on the leather couch and put her hands over her face. "He thinks something is coming," she said through her fingers. "What kind of something?" "He won't say. He says if he tells us, we'll try to warn people, and warning people will get us killed." I looked at the photograph in my hand. My mother on the dock. The water behind her was the color of a bruise just before it fades. "Claire," I said, "is he sick?" She lowered her hands. Her eyes were dry, which somehow was worse than if she had been weeping. "I don't think so, Danny. I think that's what scares me." We spent the day pretending to have a normal visit. My father made coffee. He asked Claire about her caseload. He asked me about the job in Portland I had not actually started yet. And I lied and told him it was going well, because I did not know what else to do with a man who had burned our childhood the night before and was now buttering toast. At one point, he went out to the shed and came back with a duffel bag, which he set on the kitchen table without explanation. Claire and I looked at each other across the room, and neither of us asked what was inside. That night, after he had gone to bed, I went into the study and opened his desk. I had never done that before. I had been raised to respect the closed doors in our house, and my father's desk had been one of them for 30 years. But the lock was already broken, and the bottom drawer slid open as if it had been waiting. Inside were 3 things: a handgun, oiled, loaded, with 2 extra magazines beside it, a leather-bound notebook full of dates, coordinates, and names I did not recognize, and a single photograph he had not burned. A photograph of a man I had never seen before, standing in front of a chain-link fence with a building behind him I did not recognize, smiling the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were 4 words: "If he finds us." I closed the drawer. I did not sleep. I sat in the chair behind his desk until the sun came up, and when Claire knocked on the door at 7, I did not tell her what I had found. I do not know why. I think I already understood, in some buried animal part of me, that my father had been telling the truth. The first day passed the way days pass when you know something is wrong, but cannot yet name it. I helped my father move firewood from the shed to the porch. Claire made calls to her office and rescheduled 3 depositions without explanation. My father did not mention the photographs again. He did not mention the duffel bag on the kitchen table either, which had somehow grown to 2 duffel bags by lunchtime, joined by a plastic crate of medical supplies I recognized from his old practice. He moved through the house with quiet purpose, the way he used to move through the operating theater when I visited him as a child. And Claire and I orbited him without interfering. At 3 in the afternoon, our neighbor came up the gravel drive. His name was Henrik Olsen, a retired commercial fisherman who lived in the next property over. A widower with a kind face and a voice ruined by 40 years of cigarettes. Henrik and my father had been friends since before I was born. He came up the porch steps holding a casserole dish, the universal currency of grief in our part of the country. And I realized only then that the rest of the world might have assumed something had happened to one of us. "Walter," Henrik said, "you haven't been answering. Phone's been off. For a week." My father took the casserole. "Come in, Hen. Sit down. I'll pour you something." Henrik came in. He sat at the kitchen table between the two duffel bags, and he looked at them. And then he looked at my father, and his eyes changed. I was standing by the sink, and I saw it happen. The kindness in Henrik's face was replaced by something harder, more careful. He had seen those bags before, or bags like them, or he understood what they meant in a way Claire and I did not. "Walter," he said slowly, "what did you hear?" My father set a glass of whiskey in front of him. "More than I should have." "From who?" "Doesn't matter. It does to me." My father sat down across from him. For a moment they looked at each other the way men look at each other when they have known each other long enough that words are almost an inconvenience. Then my father said something I did not expect. "You should take Marta and go to your sister's, tonight. Drive the back roads. Don't stop in any town larger than 5,000 people." Henrik's hand tightened on the glass. "How long?" he said. 40 hours, maybe less." Henrik nodded once. He drank the whiskey. He stood up. He looked at me across the kitchen, and his face softened for a single moment, the way a man's face softens when he is saying goodbye to someone he does not expect to see again. Then he walked out of the house without another word, got into his truck, and drove away. Claire came down the stairs 10 minutes later. She had heard most of it from the landing. "Dad," she said, "what did you do at the lab?" My father looked at his hands. The whiskey bottle was still on the table, and he reached for it now, poured himself 2 fingers, and drank them in one swallow. "I consulted," he said. "You know that." "On what?" "Things I am not allowed to discuss." "Dad." "Claire. Tell us right now, because if Henrik just drove off to save his wife's life, your children deserve at least that much." My father set the glass down very carefully, as if it might shatter from the weight of what he was about to say. 3 years ago," he said, "I signed a non-disclosure agreement that if I violate it, will result in the immediate execution of every member of my family. That is not a metaphor. That is the literal contractual language, written by people who have the power to enforce it. I cannot tell you what I know. I can only get you ready. So please, let me get you ready." Claire sat down. She sat down the way people sit down when their legs have made the decision for them. I had never seen my sister look small before. She was the tallest woman in any room she walked into, not because of her height, but because of the way she held herself. And now, she was folded into one of our mother's old kitchen chairs, like a girl who had just been told the truth about something she had suspected for years. "How long have you known?" she said. 3 years. 3 years. Yes. And you didn't tell us. I couldn't. You could have. And then you would have told someone, your husband, your colleagues, a journalist. You would have done what you do, Claire. You would have tried to fix it, and you would have died. And so would your brother. And so would I. And it still would have happened. The only thing I could do was wait until it was too late for anyone to stop it, and then make sure you were ready when it came. I was still standing by the sink. My hands were wet. I do not remember turning on the tap. "Dad," I said. What is it? He looked at me. He looked at me the way he had looked at me the night before, with that terrible clarity, and I understood that he was about to tell me something he had been carrying alone for 3 years, and that the carrying of it had aged him in ways I had refused to see. It started as a treatment, he said, for traumatic brain injury, a protein construct that was supposed to encourage neural regeneration in soldiers. It worked. It worked too well. The patients recovered cognitive function, motor function, everything. And then, about 90 days in, they began to change. Their aggression centers became hyperactive. Their pain response collapsed. They stopped recognizing faces. They stopped sleeping. By day 120, they were no longer the people they had been. By day 150, they were no longer recognizably human in any way that mattered. Claire's mouth opened. No sound came out. The trial was terminated, my father continued. The subjects were supposed to be euthanized and incinerated. They were not. Someone, somewhere in the chain of command, decided that what we had created was more valuable as an asset than as a failure. The remaining subjects were moved to a facility I am not going to name. And 6 months ago, that facility experienced what was reported as a fire. It was not a fire. They got out, I said. Some of them, not all. The ones that got out have been moving slowly because the disease does not spread the way the public has been trained to imagine. It is not a bite. It is airborne, but only at the late stage, and only in concentrated indoor environments. Outside, in open air, in sunlight, the active particles degrade within minutes, so it has been spreading through buildings, through ventilation systems, through subways, through hospitals, through schools. How many? Claire whispered. Containment failed in 3 cities last week. By tomorrow night, it will be in 30. By the end of the week, every major metropolitan area in the Northern Hemisphere. I sat down on the floor. I do not remember choosing to sit down. The linoleum was cold under my hands, and I could feel each individual tile against my palms. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I was thinking that this was the floor my mother had mopped every Sunday morning for 26 years. And now my father was telling me the world was ending on it. The photograph, I said. In your desk. His face changed. For the first time since the conversation began, I saw fear in him. Real fear. Not the controlled, prepared fear of a man who has been waiting for catastrophe, but the personal, intimate fear of a man who has been waiting for one specific person to come looking for him. You went in my desk. Who is he? My father closed his eyes. He is the reason I burned the photographs. His name, my father told us, was Aldous Rain. He had been the principal investigator on the original trial, the man who had signed off on continuing the program after the failure, the man who had personally authorized the relocation of the surviving subjects to the facility that was now no longer a facility. He was not a soldier, and he was not a politician. He was a scientist who had decided, somewhere along the way, that the people who could survive what he had built were the people who deserved to inherit what came after it. He had told my father this once, over dinner, in a tone my father described as conversational. He believes the outbreak is a filter, my father said. He believes the people prepared for it will be the foundation of whatever comes next. He has been collecting names for years, people with skills he wants, people with bloodlines he wants. He approached me because I'm a trauma surgeon and because my children are healthy and because my late wife came from a family with documented longevity. He wanted us in his enclave. I refused. And he kept the photograph, I said. He kept all of them. He photographed every member of every family he tried to recruit. The ones who said yes, he embraced. The ones who said no, he kept anyway. For later, the photograph in my desk is the one he handed me. I kept it because I needed to remember his face. Claire stood up. She walked to the window. Outside, the late afternoon light was doing the thing it does in autumn, turning the birch trees the color of wet brass. And beyond them, the lake was perfectly still, the way it gets before a storm that has not yet decided to arrive. "How long until he comes for us?" she said. "He will not come himself. He will send people. They will come within the first week of open collapse, when the roads are still passable, but the authorities are no longer functioning. They will offer us a choice. Join him or be removed." Removed. Yes. So we run. We do not run. Running is what they expect. Running puts us on roads they are watching. We stay here. We make this house disappear. We make ourselves disappear. And when they come, we make sure they cannot report back. I had never heard my father speak that way. I had heard him speak about anatomy, about loss, about the precise mechanics of grief. I had never heard him speak about killing men. But there was no heat in his voice. There was only the same calm with which he had once described the procedure for repairing a punctured lung. And I understood that this, too, was something he had been planning for 3 years. That night, Sanyanan, my father walked us through the house. He showed us the cache under the floorboards in the pantry, the rifle wrapped in oilcloth behind the water heater, the ammunition stored in coffee cans in the root cellar, the radio tuned to a frequency he would not name, the maps marked with routes that avoided every major road within 200 miles. He showed us the well he had drilled 2 summers ago that I had assumed was for irrigation. He showed us the solar array on the south slope of the roof that I had assumed was a midlife eccentricity. He had been preparing this house, room by room, for 3 years, while we had been visiting on holidays and noticing nothing. "There is one more thing," he said, when we had returned to the kitchen. He went to the duffel bags. He unzipped the second one. Inside, packed in foam, were 6 glass vials of clear liquid and a single auto-injector. "This is the only working countermeasure that ever came out of the program," he said. "I stole it the day I resigned. It does not cure the infection. It delays the late-stage transformation by approximately 72 hours in adults of normal body mass. There are 6 doses. Use them only if you are certain you have been exposed." He looked at us. "There are 6 doses, and there are 3 of us. The math is intentional." Claire did not sleep that night. I know because I heard her in the hallway at every hour, walking the length of the house and back, the way our mother used to walk when she could not stop thinking. I lay in my old bedroom, the one with the model airplanes still hanging from the ceiling by fishing line, and I stared at them and tried to remember the boy who had built them. I could not. He was a stranger now. He had been a stranger since the moment I had seen the photograph in my father's desk, and the strangeness was widening every hour. And I understood that by the time this was over, if it was ever over, there would be nothing left of him at all. In the morning, my father made pancakes. That is the detail I cannot get past, even now. He made pancakes with blueberries from the freezer, the way he had every Saturday of our childhood. And Claire and I sat at the table and ate them. And none of us spoke about the duffel bags, and none of us spoke about Aldous Rain, and none of us spoke about the 6 vials. And for 45 minutes, the world was a kitchen in autumn, with a smell of butter and coffee. And I think my father gave us that on purpose, because he knew it was the last meal of its kind any of us would ever have. At 9 in the morning, The radio in the corner crackled to life on its own. My father had set it to receive an automated emergency broadcast that did not yet exist on any public channel. The voice that came through was synthetic, calm, and clinical. Containment perimeter echo has failed. All assets requested to report. Containment perimeter. Foxtrot reporting unstable. Civilian casualty estimate exceeding projected ceiling. Recommend immediate transition to Phase 4 protocols. My father turned the radio off. Echo was Seattle, he said. Foxtrot is Portland. I stood up so quickly the chair fell over behind me. Mara is in Portland, I said. My father did not move. Danny, my fiancée is in Portland. Dad, she is in Portland right now. I have to call her. Danny, I have to call her. You can call her. You will not be able to reach her. The cellular networks in containment zones are being deliberately suppressed to slow panic. Try if you need to. But understand what you will hear or not hear before you dial. I dialed. The call did not connect. I dialed again. It did not connect. I dialed a third time, and a fourth, and a fifth. And on the sixth try, a recorded voice told me that the number I was trying to reach was temporarily unavailable, and I sat down on the kitchen floor with the phone still in my hand and did not move for a long time. Claire came and sat next to me. She did not say anything. She did not put her arm around me because she knew I would not have been able to bear it. She just sat next to me, close enough that I could feel her shoulder against mine, and we breathed together for a while. And eventually my father came and sat on my other side, and the three of us sat on the linoleum in a row, like passengers waiting for a train we did not actually want to catch. I have to go to her, I said eventually. You will not survive the drive, my father said. I have to try. Daniel, don't. Daniel, listen to me. Mara is a strong woman. She is intelligent and she is resourceful. If she is alive, she is moving. If she is moving north, because that is what we talked about at Christmas, and you know it. She will come to us. If you leave now, you will not find her, because she will not be where you're going. You will only die on a road between here and a city that no longer exists. I closed my eyes. I knew he was right. I hated him for being right. The first infected I ever saw was a woman in a green raincoat, walking up the middle of the county road at 4 p.m. on the second day. I was on the roof, helping my father secure the last of the storm shutters, and I saw her from a quarter-mile away. She was not running. That is the thing the movies get wrong about the early stage. She was walking, slowly, almost peacefully, with her arms hanging loose at her sides and her head tilted at an angle that was not quite right, as if she were listening to music only she could hear. I lowered the hammer. My father followed my gaze. Down, he said quietly. Now. We climbed down the ladder without speaking. Claire was in the yard, stacking firewood against the north wall, and my father gave her a single hand signal we had agreed on the night before, and she dropped the log she was holding and walked, not ran, to the back door. We were inside within 90 seconds. My father went to the window with a pair of binoculars. I went to the rifle. Claire went to the radio, which she had taught herself to operate in a single evening, because Claire learns the way other people breathe. She is alone, my father said. She is in mid-stage. She has not seen the house. How do you know she is mid-stage? Her gait, the way her head is tilted, the fact that she is outdoors in daylight. Late-stage subjects avoid sunlight. Early-stage subjects can still pass for normal in short interactions. Mid-stage is the dangerous middle. Aware enough to seek, deteriorated enough to be uninhibited. What do we do? We wait. If she passes, we do nothing. If she turns toward the house, I will handle it. She passed. She walked past the end of our driveway without slowing, without turning her head, and continued north up the road. And she was gone from sight within 10 minutes. My father lowered the binoculars. His hands were shaking very slightly, in a way I had never seen them shake before. He set the binoculars down before Claire or I could comment on it. "That is the first one," he said. "There will be more. They will come in waves. The first wave will be like her. People who got out of the cities on foot, who walked along roads because roads are what they remember. The second wave will be different. The second wave will be the ones who have been outside long enough to lose what little remained. The third wave is the one we have to be ready for. And the third wave will not be infected at all. The third wave will be Rain's people." "How will we know them?" Claire said. "They will be the only ones who look healthy." We spent the rest of that day in silence, moving through the house the way people move through a house they no longer fully own. My father covered the windows with the prepared blackout panels he had built into the frames 3 years ago. Claire ran wire from the perimeter trip alarms to a panel in the pantry. I cleaned the rifle, which my father had taught me to clean when I was 12, and which I had not touched in 15 years, and which my hands remembered better than I did. At dusk, 3 more figures walked past the end of the drive. None of them turned. One of them was a child. I will not describe the child. I will only say that my father, who had never once raised his voice at me in 29 years, took the binoculars out of my hands without a word and put them in a drawer and did not let me look through them again for 2 full days. That night, for the first time since I had arrived, I went to my father in his bedroom. He was sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark, his hands folded in his lap, and he did not look up when I came in. "I'm sorry," I said. "For what?" "For not visiting more." He did not answer for a long time. "Sit down, Danny." I sat down. The bed was the same bed my parents had shared for 30 years, with the same patchwork quilt my mother had finished 6 months before she died, and my father had not changed any of it. The room smelled of his aftershave and of the cedar lining of the closet, and faintly of my mother still, which I had not expected and which made my throat close. "I was angry with you," I said. "After Mom died, I was angry that you stayed up here alone. I thought you were giving up. I thought you were punishing yourself, and I did not want to watch it, so I stopped coming. And now I find out you have been preparing to save my life for 3 years, and I have not even called you on your birthday." My father put his hand on the back of my neck. It was an old gesture from childhood, the kind of gesture fathers in our part of the country used instead of saying the things they actually meant. "Danny," he said, "listen to me. I did not stay up here alone because I was punishing myself. I stayed up here because I knew what was coming, and I knew this was the only place I could prepare for it without being watched. I let you think I was grieving badly because grief was a cover story that no one questioned. Your anger at me kept you in Portland. Your anger at me kept you alive. I am sorry for it, but I am not sorry for it because you are sitting next to me right now." I did not know what to do with that. I still do not. "There is something else," he said. "Something I did not tell Claire." I waited. "The countermeasure, the 6 vials. I told you it delays the late-stage transformation by 72 hours. "Yes. That is true for adult subjects of normal body mass. It is not true for me." I turned my head. "Dad, I was exposed 11 days ago. In the city, during a meeting I should not have taken. I knew within 48 hours. I have been on the countermeasure since the day after. I have been rotating doses to extend the delay. I have approximately 4 days remaining before the countermeasure stops working. The room did something I cannot describe. It did not spin. It became, somehow, both smaller and farther away, as if I were watching it from inside a long pipe. "How many doses have you used?" I said. 3. Of the original 9. Yes. And there are 6 left. Yes. Enough for me and Claire to use 1 each if we are exposed, and 4 to spare. Yes. Or enough for you to keep delaying. For another 12 days. Maybe. After that, the body builds resistance to the compound, and no further extension is possible. I sat there. I sat there for what felt like a long time, but was probably less than a minute. And I thought about every conversation we had had since I arrived. And I understood now why he had not raised his voice, why he had moved with such precision, why he had insisted on showing us every system in the house, why he had handed me the rifle and not kept it for himself. "You are not coming with us," I said. "No. When the time comes, you are going to send Claire and me out." "Yes." "And you are going to stay here." "Yes." "And you are going to wait for them, for Rain's people. Because you will be the bait. Because as long as you are here, they will think we are here." He did not answer. He did not need to. I put my face in my hands. I did not cry. I think I was past crying. I think something inside me had already begun the long, slow work of becoming the kind of man who could survive what was being asked of me. And that kind of man does not cry in his father's bedroom on the second night of the end of the world. "Okay," I said. "Okay." He squeezed the back of my neck once, and then he let go. I did not tell Claire. He had asked me not to, and I owed him that much. And I told myself it was a kindness, even though I knew, somewhere underneath, that I was also protecting myself from her grief, which would have been larger than mine, and which I did not yet have the strength to witness. So I carried it alone for the next 40 hours. And the carrying of it changed the shape of every conversation I had with both of them. And I think Claire knew something had shifted. Because she began to look at me the way she used to look at our mother in the last months, with a kind of soft, watchful patience that asked no questions. On the 3rd morning, my father took me down to the root cellar. I had been in the root cellar 100 times as a child. It was a low, stone-walled room under the kitchen, accessed by a trap door in the pantry floor. And it had always smelled of earth and apples and the slow chemistry of preserved things. My father lit the kerosene lantern at the bottom of the steps, and I followed him into the dark. And he walked me to the far wall, where a wooden shelving unit stood loaded with jars of pickled beets my mother had put up the summer before she died. He pulled the shelving unit away from the wall. It moved on hidden casters, silently. Behind it was a steel door. "Dad." I built it the first summer after the diagnosis, before anyone knew, before I knew I was going to need it. He opened the door. The room behind it was small, perhaps 8 feet by 10, and it was lined with concrete. There were shelves of canned food. There were cases of bottled water. There was a chemical toilet, a cot, a battery bank, a ventilation system with a hand crank, and a small writing desk with a hurricane lamp on it. On the desk was a stack of letters, bound with twine, addressed in my father's handwriting. The top letter said, "To my children after." I did not pick it up. I could not have. "This is for you," he said. "If you have to leave the house, you do not leave through the front door. You come down here and you wait. The entrance is invisible from the kitchen. If Rain's people come, they will search the house. They will find the obvious caches. They will conclude you ran, and they will leave. After they leave, you stay here for 72 hours, minimum. Then you come out and you go north, using the route I showed you. And you do not stop until you reach the property in Cape Brett. Cape Brett. Henrik's sister has a cabin there. Henrik knows you are coming. He will be there before you. He has been waiting for my call for 3 years. I looked around the room. I looked at the letters on the desk. I looked at the cot, which was made up with sheets and a blanket I recognized from my childhood bed. You built this for us, I said, before you even knew. I built it because I was afraid for you. I have been afraid for you since the day you were born. I did not understand that being afraid for your children is the permanent condition of being a father until I was one. Most fathers never have to act on the fear. I happened to be a father in a time when the fear became literal. That is all. I looked at him in the lantern light, and he was both my father and a stranger. And I loved him so much in that moment that I could not breathe through it. Dad, don't. I need to say it. Then say it. I love you. I've always loved you. I was a coward for staying away. I should have come home. I should have come home a long time ago. He nodded. He did not speak. He turned away from me and adjusted the wick of the lantern. And I understood that he was crying, and that he did not want me to see. And so I looked at the floor and gave him the privacy he had given me 1,000 times. That afternoon, the cellular network died completely. My phone, which had been showing 1 bar of signal intermittently for 2 days, went to no service and stayed there. The radio, which had been broadcasting automated containment updates on the half hour, fell silent for the first time. My father said it would not come back on, and it did not. From that moment forward, we had no information about the outside world except what we could see from our own windows. What we could see was changing. The road traffic, which had been almost non-existent for 2 days, picked up sharply around 3 in the afternoon. Cars came past the end of the drive at speed, packed with families, with belongings tied to the roofs, with the desperate geometry of people who had waited too long to leave the city and were now trying to outrun something they could not see. None of them stopped. None of them looked at our house. They were aimed north, the way migrating birds are aimed, by an instinct older than reason. And they did not know yet that there was no north left to reach. Around 5, the first crash happened. We heard it before we saw it, a long sliding sound followed by the wrong kind of silence. And then the sound of voices shouting. My father went to the upstairs window with the binoculars. He came back down within a minute. 2 cars, he said. Half a mile up the road. One of them is on fire. People are running. Toward us? Some of them away. There is a man trying to help a woman out of the second car. There are children in the back seat. Claire was already at the door. No, my father said. Dad, no, Claire. There are children in the car. I know. We have to. We do not. We cannot. If we open this house to those people, we open this house to whatever they have been exposed to. And we open this house to every person who sees us, help them. We become a known location. We become a target. Within 24 hours, we become a target for rain. Within 48, we become a target for every desperate person within 10 miles. We will not survive it. Dad, Claire, look at me. Look at me. She looked at him. I have spent 3 years preparing to save my 2 children. I cannot save more than that. I am sorry. I will be sorry for the rest of my life, which is going to be very short. But I cannot save more than that. Do you understand me? Claire did not answer. She turned and walked up the stairs and shut the door of her bedroom. And she did not come down again for 2 hours. I stayed at the window. I watched the man in the road eventually pick up the woman and carry her into the trees. I watched the children climb out of the second car on their own and follow him. I watched the first car burn until the fuel tank caught, and the whole thing went up in a black column that the wind pulled sideways across the field. And I watched the smoke from our chimney rise straight up into it and disappear. And I understood that we had just made a choice that I was going to carry for the rest of my life. That night, Claire came into my room. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, the way our mother used to when one of us had a fever. And she put her hand on my forehead. And it was such a familiar gesture that I almost broke. "Danny," she said, "promise me something. Anything. If we get out of this, if we get to Cape Brett, if we survive, promise me we do not become the kind of people who would have closed that door without flinching. Promise me we still flinch, even when we do the hard thing. Promise me we still flinch." "I promise." She kissed my forehead and left. I did not sleep. They came on the 4th morning, and they came exactly the way my father had said they would. The car was a black SUV with no markings and no license plate, and it drove up our gravel drive at a steady, unhurried pace, as if the driver were arriving for an appointment that had been on his calendar for a long time. There were 3 men inside. They were dressed in civilian clothes that were a little too clean, a little too new, a little too coordinated, and they were healthy in a way that no one outside should have been healthy by then. My father saw them from the kitchen window. He turned to Claire and to me, and his face was the calmest I had ever seen it. And he said one word. "Down." We went down. We had practiced it. We had practiced it the previous evening, 4 times, until we could go from the kitchen to the root cellar, to the steel door, to the inner room in under 90 seconds, without making a sound. And we did it now in 82. My father closed the steel door behind us himself. He did not come in with us. He looked at me through the gap as it closed, and he did not say goodbye, because we had agreed there would not be a goodbye, because a goodbye was a luxury we could not afford, and also because neither of us would have survived it. Then the door shut, and we heard the shelving unit roll back into place above us, and we were alone in the small concrete room with the hurricane lamp and the cot and the stack of letters. We could hear, faintly, through the ventilation shaft, what happened next. We heard my father open the front door. We heard him greet the men by name, all 3 of them, which surprised me, because it meant he had known they would be the ones to come. We heard him invite them in. We heard the clink of glasses, which meant he had poured them whiskey, which meant he was buying time, which meant he had a plan I had not been told about, because my father did not pour drinks for men he was about to die for, unless the pouring itself was part of the operation. We heard one of them ask, in a voice that was too pleasant, where his children were. We heard my father say that we had left a week ago, that we had not believed him, that we had laughed at him and gone back to our lives, that he was alone in the house and would be alone in the house, and that they could search it if they liked. We heard them search it. We heard them search it for almost an hour. They were thorough. They opened doors. They moved furniture. They went into the pantry. We heard footsteps directly over our heads. And Claire's hand found mine in the dark. And she did not squeeze, because squeezing would have made noise. She just rested her hand on top of mine, and her hand was steadier than mine was. They did not find us. We heard them come back to the kitchen. We heard one of them ask my father, in the same pleasant voice, if he was sure his children had left. We heard my father say that he was sure. We heard the same voice say that Mr. Rain would be disappointed. We heard my father say that Mr. Rain had been disappointed before, and that he had survived it, and that he expected he would survive it again. There was a long silence. Then we heard the voice say, very quietly, that they had not come for the children, actually. That the children had been a courtesy. That they had come for him. That Mr. Rain had a use for him, given his medical training, given his familiarity with the program, and that the offer was still open, and that the offer expired in approximately 60 seconds. We heard my father laugh. I had not heard him laugh in 3 years. Aldous always did love a deadline, he said. And then we heard the shot. It was not the shot I expected. It was not loud. It was a single, muffled crack. The sound a hunting rifle makes through a wall. And for a long moment, I did not understand what had happened. Then I heard the other two voices shouting, and a second shot, and a third, and a fourth, and then I understood. My father had not been disarmed. He had been waiting for the man with the offer to lean in, the way men with offers always lean in at the critical moment. And he had shot him from under the kitchen table with a handgun from the bottom drawer of his desk. Then he had moved, fast, and he had taken the second man through the doorway, and the third man had run. And the third man had not made it to the front door, because my father had been hunting since he was 11 years old. And because 3 years is a long time to plan for a single moment. And because the house belonged to him in a way it could never have belonged to them. There was a fourth shot after a longer pause. I did not understand the fourth shot until later. I will explain it later. Then silence. We waited. We waited the way we had been told to wait. 72 hours, minimum. Claire and I sat on the cot in the lantern light, and we did not speak for a long time because there was nothing to say. And because anything we did say would have been an attempt to drown out the listening. And the listening was the only thing keeping us alive. After an hour, we heard footsteps above us. Slow, uneven, one person. Then we heard a voice, very faint, through the ventilation shaft. "Danny, Claire, it is me. Do not come out. Do not open the door. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then you will not hear me again. And you will still not open the door until the 72 hours have passed. Do you understand? Tap once on the pipe, if you understand." Claire reached up and tapped the ventilation pipe once with the handle of the screwdriver from the toolkit. "Good," my father said. He was breathing strangely. I could hear it through the pipe. The fourth shot had not been him shooting. The fourth shot had been one of them shooting him. "They came earlier than I expected," he said. "I had hoped to have another day. I am sorry. I did not get to finish the letters. The ones on the desk are enough. The rest you will have to figure out yourselves. And I am sorry for that too. I want you to know something. I want you to know that I have been afraid every day of my life since you were born. And that the fear has been the best thing that ever happened to me. Because the fear is what love feels like when it is paying attention. I have loved you both with my whole attention. I am dying now with my whole attention. There is nothing in me that is not aimed at you." Claire was crying. She was crying without sound, the way she had cried at our mother's funeral, with her whole face working and no noise coming out. "There is one more thing," he said. "Rainey is in a compound in the Adirondacks. The coordinates are in the notebook. I am not telling you this so that you will go there. I am telling you this so that you will know where not to go. Do you understand?" Claire tapped once. "Good," he said. "I love you. I love you both. I'm going outside now. I do not want to die in the house. I want to die where I can see the lake. Goodbye, my children. Be brave, and be kind, and remember to flinch." We heard him drag himself slowly across the kitchen floor. We heard the back door open. We heard it close. We did not hear anything else. Claire put her face against my shoulder, and I held her, and we sat in the lantern light, and the lantern burned low, and neither of us moved for a very long time. We stayed for 72 hours. We stayed because he had told us to, and because by then his telling us to do anything had become a sacred thing. The last instruction of a man whose every other instruction had kept us alive. We stayed, and we read the letters by lantern light. And Claire read them aloud because I could not. And we ate cold food from cans, and we used the chemical toilet, and we did not speak much because there was nothing left to say that the letters had not already said. The letters were not what I expected. They were not apologies. They were not confessions. They were instructions, written in his small, careful handwriting, page after page of practical guidance for a life I had not yet learned how to live. How to purify water without chemicals, how to set a snare, how to identify edible plants in the northern forests by season, how to read the signs of late-stage infection from a distance of 100 meters, how to talk to a frightened person without making them more frightened, how to bury a body in winter ground, how to mourn without stopping. The last letter was different. The last letter was 3 pages long, and it was addressed to both of us, and it was about our mother. It was about the day they had met in a hospital cafeteria during his residency, when she had been a nurse on the pediatric ward, and he had spilled coffee on her shoes, and she had laughed at him instead of being angry, and how he had known in that moment that he was going to marry her, and how he had been right. It was about the night I was born, and the night Claire was born, and the long, quiet years between, and the morning she had told him about the lump under her arm, and the year that had followed, and the last thing she had said to him, which I will not write here, because some things belong only to the people they were said to. He had not burned that letter. He had left it for us to read in the dark, in the place where he had spent 3 years preparing to keep us alive. And when Claire finished reading it aloud, she folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of her coat, where she carried it for the next 2 years, and where, I suspect, she carries it still. When the 72 hours were up, we came out. The house was the way he had left it. The bodies of the 3 men were on the floor where they had fallen, and Claire and I dragged them, one by one, into the yard, because we could not stand the idea of leaving them in the kitchen. We did not bury them. We did not have the time, and we did not have the will. And my father, in one of his letters, had been very clear that we were to leave the house within 4 hours of opening the door, and we obeyed him. We found him by the lake. He had made it to the small wooden bench at the end of the dock, the one my mother had loved. And he had died, sitting upright, with his back against the rail and his face turned toward the water. The lake was perfectly still. The light was the same brass-colored autumn, light that had been there the afternoon Claire arrived, 4 days and an entire lifetime ago. We buried him under the white pine at the corner of the property, the one he had planted the year I was born, and we did not have time to mark the grave. But Claire took a stone from the lake and set it at the head, and I think the stone is still there, although I have not been back to check. Then we left. We took the duffel bags and the rifle and the notebook and the 3 remaining vials of the countermeasure. And we took my father's car, which he had topped up with fuel and tuned the engine of 2 days before, and we drove north on the back roads he had marked on the map. And we did not look back, because looking back was a luxury we could no longer afford. The drive to Cape Brett took 6 days. It should have taken 9 hours. I will not describe everything we saw, because some of it I have not yet found words for, and because some of it I have found words for and chosen not to use them. I will say that the world had not ended in the way we had imagined endings would look. It had simply tilted. The roads were emptier than they had ever been, but they were not empty. The towns we passed were quieter than they had ever been, but they were not silent. People were still moving. People were still trying. The difference was that no one was in charge anymore, and the absence of being in charge had not produced the chaos we had been taught to expect, but something stranger, a kind of provisional, watchful calm, as if everyone were waiting to see who would speak first. We passed 3 infected on the 2nd day. They were in a field by the side of the road, and they did not see us, because the car was moving and they were not. And my father had been right about late-stage subjects avoiding sunlight. They were under a tree, and they were standing very still, and they were facing in the same direction, the way cattle face into the wind. And I have thought about them many times since, and I have not yet decided what they were waiting for. We passed a woman on the 3rd day who was walking along the shoulder with a child on her hip, and a 2nd child holding her hand. And Claire slowed the car without consulting me, and she rolled down the window, and she asked the woman if she needed water. The woman looked at us for a long moment, and then she said yes. We gave her 4 bottles. We did not give her a ride, because we could not. And the woman understood, and she nodded, and she walked on. Claire watched her in the rearview mirror until she was out of sight. And then Claire put her hands on the steering wheel and lowered her forehead to them. And she said very quietly, "We flinched." And I said, "We flinched." And we drove on. We reached Cape Brett on the 6th day. Henrik was there. He had been there for 5 days. His wife, Marta, was there. She was thinner than I remembered, and her hands shook. But she made us soup the first night, and she did not ask us any questions, which was a kindness I have not forgotten. The cabin was small. The cabin was on a hill. The cabin had a view of a different lake, a colder one, and the lake had a way of catching the light in the evening that reminded me of the lake my father had died beside. Although I did not say this to Claire, because Claire was still in the part of grief where comparisons were not yet bearable. Mara came 3 weeks later. I did not believe it at first. I was outside, splitting wood, and Henrik called me up to the road, and there she was, standing on the gravel in a coat I did not recognize, thinner than she had ever been, with a cut on her cheekbone that had healed badly and a backpack that was almost empty. She had walked. She had walked most of the way from Portland because the cars had stopped working in the 3rd week, and she had remembered, the way my father had said she would, what we had talked about at Christmas. She had remembered Cape Brett. She had remembered Henrik's sister's cabin. She had walked. I did not say anything. I dropped the axe. I crossed the road, and I put my arms around her, and she put her arms around me, and we stood there for a long time. And Claire watched from the porch, and Henrik watched from the truck, and Marta watched from the kitchen window, and nobody said anything, because there was nothing to say that the standing was not already saying. That night, in the cabin by the fire, Mara took a folded photograph out of the inside pocket of her coat. It was the photograph of my mother on the dock, the one I had not thrown in the fire, the one I had given to Mara months before without knowing why. She had carried it the whole way. It has been 2 years. We live in the cabin still. Henrik died last winter of an ordinary thing, a cough that went deep, and we buried him beside the trail he had walked every morning. Marta lives with Claire now. They have become a kind of family I did not know was possible. Two women who lost everything and decided, without speaking of it, to make a new everything together. Mara is pregnant. We do not know yet what kind of world we are bringing the child into, but my father's letters are on the shelf above the stove, and I read them aloud sometimes in the evening, and I think the child will know him, in the way children know the dead who loved them. I think about the photographs often, the ones he burned, and I used to believe he had erased us. I understand now that he had freed us. A face in a photograph can be found. A face in a memory cannot. I still flinch. Claire still flinches. We have taught Mara to flinch, and we will teach the child. It is the only inheritance that mattered. It is the one he meant to leave.